Hello, everyone. Monika Hendrix here. I'm back again with Nubia Wilson for another talk about Trauma Recovery 101. Today's topic is going to be love after trauma. And for those of you who might have missed our first segment, I wanted to introduce Nubia to you. So Nubia is my colleague and friend. She's also an entrepreneur, author, and advocate for survivors of sexual abuse. As many of you know, I am a conscious relationship and trauma recovery coach. And so when Newbie and I linked up a couple of years ago, we just shared a lot of the same passions, and a lot of our identification comes from being survivors of trauma. So welcome. We're glad to be here with you today. And we have got a really, really great topic for you. Learning to love after trauma. So Newbie and I were discussing like the effects of childhood abuse, right? And how that can impact our relationships as adults. Not just our romantic relationships, but any intimate relationship, really, because our earliest memories of love really form the way that we relate with other people, relate to other people, the way that we identify with ourselves and with our feelings. So I wanted to share for those of you who are watching as well that, our message here today is not to so much harp on the wounding, right? But also to remind you that it is so possible to embrace love after trauma, any trauma, whether that's childhood trauma or something that you've experienced as an adult. And it is possible to have thriving, healthy, connected relationships again. So, thank you again for being here with us, Nubia. Thank you so much for hopping on today again.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk about this topic. It's a good one.
Yeah, it really is. So I want to just lead with, our childhood, right? Our earliest memories. I want to share a little bit about myself. So, as a child, I grew up with my grandparents initially, and my earliest memories of love were beautiful. My grandparents had a beautiful, loving relationship, and my grandfather was really more like a father to me, and he was just such a good man of integrity, peaceful man. And so I saw them and I saw their dynamic, and that really left a really positive imprint on me. As I got a little bit older, my family dynamic shifted, and my memories of love then became, a little bit more altered. I did experience, emotional abuse as a child. I experienced, various degrees of physical abuse. And so that really had an impact on me, because then I learned not to trust, right? I learned not to trust that it's not safe to be who I am, because I'm not good enough and you might not like me because I'm flawed. And I took on a lot of the energy of shame as a child. I felt extremely unworthy of loving relationships. I withdrew from my family. As a child, I was extremely introverted. I believe that's part of my personality, but it's also, a trauma response. I withdrew into myself, and I just carried so much shame.
Mhm.
So that really impacted my relationships, moving on in life. And, um, it really had an effect on the types of people that I attracted, the friends that I attracted. I attracted people who were unkind to me, who violated me. And I was running off of this story that, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, therefore, this is okay. Right. And it was very interesting to think that, like, we attract to our reality, um, you know, the very situation we seek to avoid. And so many of the times I was avoiding losing love, or, falling out of love. And lo and behold, I would have relationship after relationship that wouldn't work out. And it didn't work out because, I was not connected to myself. I wasn't operating as my highest and best self. I was operating from a place of wounding. And I was replaying all of those childhood wounds in my intimate relationships. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you, to let you know, like, I get it. I was just so mind blown when I started my own healing journey and was like, oh my God, like, you know, I have the power now to shift this. I can start to heal. I can start to attract better. And, it's an amazing thing when that happens for you. So if you have gone through, any type of traumatic experience with love, if you've been through like toxic relationships, it's okay. There's hope, right? You can form healthy connections again. It doesn't always have to be this dramatic, chaotic saga. You can have a peaceful life and peaceful love. So just wanted to share that with you. And, Nubia, what was your experience like?
I loved everything you said. Like, oh, while you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I can relate so much. Oh my goodness. It's like living parallel lives with you. But yeah, I know it was tough for me. My home life was not easy because my abuser was in my home. And it just really does mess you up when it comes to feeling safe, especially if you feel like you've been violated by someone that you should be able to trust and that should have unconditional love for you. And so that thought of like my first experience receiving love or even feeling that emotion of love safely, I realized was with my father, because your mother's supposed to be the person who keeps you safe, right? Just naturally, instinctually. And if you don't feel safe by your mother, that can really mess you up. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized that I was always anxious around her. And she and I talk about it openly now, about how, I have anxiety and I feel bad, and I'll tell her like, that made me anxious. I need you to, can't do that anymore. You can't talk like that to me anymore, or certain things that maybe other people will go, why does that make you anxious? That's weird. But, my father and I had a great relationship. So obviously he was not the one who abused me. He saw me, and I realized, especially now as an adult, if someone doesn't see me, that makes me feel unloved. And my father accepted me for who I was, for the most part. I mean, they were also very judgmental of me. I constantly felt like I had to be perfect.
Mhm.
I wanted to be the fixer, the problem solver, and my parents didn't have a really good marriage. My grandparents were divorced. So I also didn't have a representation in front of me immediately of what a strong marriage looks like. A marriage where there's not a lot of fighting, raising children where there's not a lot of fighting. Just yelling was just normal in my house. And then I kind of freak out because I worry I'm doing that with my kids. But it's been a rough year with COVID, so I'm going to give myself a pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the back. But as an adult now, or thinking back to my very toxic relationships, I realized, actually my therapist helped me realize that. She says often the relationships that you have, are you trying to fix the relationship that didn't go right when you were a child?
Mhm.
And for me, that was my relationship with, well, my abuser, of course, but with my mom. I just knew there was always something off. And I actually married my mom in many ways. My husband is a lot like my mom, but not so much so that it doesn't work. Thank God we're still married, celebrate 12 years. But when I realized that, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. What was I thinking? So to your point, Monica, yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I've been married for 12 years. And during those 12 years, it was really tough. And we'll talk more about later some of that and what I've learned. But the good part of it is we're still together. It wasn't easy after remembering, but we did it.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It made me also think about just what you said about like how we mirror that relationship, or we look for love in the relationships that we saw as children, right? And so I was thinking how, many times looking back, it was always me, right? The common denominator in all of my relationships was me. So if I was attracting all of these, chaotic, unhealthy relationships, is like there's something inside of me that's really, really wounded. And I needed to take a look at that. And in many ways, I was looking for the love from my abuser as a child. Like I was looking for that because if I could gain that, then maybe I would be good enough, right? Then maybe I would finally be worthy. Then maybe I could finally like be proud of who I was. And that's so not true. right? And since then, I've worked through it, I've forgiven, but I didn't have that awareness. I really wasn't self-aware. So when things got, really, really bad for me down the road, I was like, all right, like I am not going to accept this. This is not going to be my story, right? I want to have more of a connection to myself. I want to have more connected relationships. I want to have connected friendships. So, that requires a lot of self-awareness. It requires a lot of self-compassion and patience and tolerance and all of that. And so, it's a process. It's not like, you snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're this loving, bubbly, you feel safe again in loving relationships. That's not true. And I also was thinking about what you shared about like the yelling, right? Because I remember as a kid just feeling like I was like this, like I was always walking on eggshells. I held a lot of trauma. There's just a lot of tension there, a lot of anxiety. And, it's no wonder that, as I grew up and I was in relationships, many times I felt those feelings again come up. And I remember I had, a boyfriend. I was younger, and he was such a sweetheart. Really didn't, he never yelled. Just very like even keeled person. And I remember one time he raised his voice, and I lost it. I was like hysterically crying. I felt so triggered, and I was like, that's a trauma response, right? It's like scary for me to be around, somebody who's really loud and aggressive. I don't like that. So that brings me to the next portion of this talk where you and I were discussing like tips, right? How can we learn to open up and feel safe in our intimate relationships again after trauma, right? How can we embrace love and not take out our wounding on our partners who, love us and want to see us through it. So it's really, really important that if you are listening and you're somebody who's gone through, something traumatic, that you express it to your partner. I really, really believe in full transparency in relationship. I think it's really important to share, like, hey, I've gone through some things. Tell them, right? Tell them what your triggers are. Tell them what happened to you. Share with them lovingly, like, I'm really feeling scared because, like, use those words, open up that vulnerable dialogue with your partner to let them know that certain things are triggers for you so that you can work through them. Because if you don't share that, how can they're not going to read your mind. They're not going to know that maybe, if a door closes loudly, it scares you, it frightens you, right? So those are all the things that are really important to have those conversations with your partner and learn to communicate in a healthy way.
Well, you had said before the importance of emotional maturity. How when you're abused as a child, you don't have that emotional maturity. You have to learn it as you go along in your healing journey. You're going to say this better than I am, but I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because it's true. When you said vulnerable, I was saying vulnerable in my head, right? That's like the main thing I never wanted to be, was vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, oh, vulnerability can be great. Let me be more vulnerable with my husband so he knows how to help me. So yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so emotional maturity is really all about regulating your emotions, learning how to do that for yourself so that you can process them, communicate your emotions and your feelings in a healthy way. And I always say this to my clients. I'm like, picture yourself in preschool again, right? We're in preschool again, and we're learning how to care and share, right? And like, let's talk about our feelings. Like, that makes me feel sad. That makes me feel mad. You really have to like go back to your inner child and start to vocally identify your feelings again to develop that emotional maturity, because that's where, if you experience childhood trauma, it was like cut off there. Something stunted it, right? You didn't learn how to process your emotions in a healthy way. Why? Because you were protecting yourself. Your body is an organism that learns how to protect itself when it's in danger. So, if it wasn't safe for you to talk about your feelings because your abuser would fly off the handle and tell you not to cry or slap you around, then you learn to shut down, that it's not safe. And
Yeah.
that's not a good place to be in as an adult. You want to be able to talk about your feelings. You want to, all the suspicions and the paranoia is like, oh my God, if I show them who I really am, they're going to run away. That needs to stop, right? Find one person that you feel safe with and start to practice that. Start to develop your emotional maturity with somebody you feel safe with, and start to practice, every day, I am feeling, right? I am, not okay with, like, identify boundaries. And I think that that's really important, is having like one person, like one safe person to start to process your feelings with as an adult, whether that be a professional, a friend, just somebody, because it's not okay to hold it in. And that's how you really develop those skills of emotional maturity, and you learn how to have it in your relationships, so that when something happens, you don't storm out of a room and slam a door, right? You stay, you talk, like you face the fears head on, right? It takes courage. Emotional maturity really takes courage,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of courage. So face your fears, face your fears. When you're scared, don't shut down. Say, I'm not doing this. I'm grown up. Now that I'm grown up, it is safe for me to express my feelings, right? Now that I'm grown up, it is safe for me to be who I am. And that's the space that you want to get into, that empowered space of like, I'm going to be who I am, and it's okay whether or not they like it.
Those are good mantras. Hopefully people have a notebook and pen or can use their iPhone to take some notes down, because those are really good mantras to say. You made me, when you said courage, you reminded me there is a book that my therapist asked me, well, advised me to read, which I did get, called Courage to Heal.
Mm.
And it's apparently it's like a very thick book. I got the Kindle version, so I didn't realize that, but it's been around for a long time, and it was written by two women many years ago, like maybe even like 15 years ago, that wanted to create this compilation of stories of fellow females who had been sexually abused, and then how they, like, things that they did to help themselves. And then the book, I mean, I think these women are professionals, so they, within the stories, these anecdotes, they insert exercises for you to do. For example, one was write to yourself, pretend you are the small child, whatever age you were when you were abused, and give yourself advice now on what you need, which I did that. I barely wrote like 5 sentences, just start crying.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. But things like that. And I mean, some of the stories I couldn't finish or read because they were triggering. And this was pretty early on in my journey to heal. But anyway, at the back of the book is a section that says for partners. And that was great. Like, I didn't actually I still today have not finished the book, which is fine because it's not really linear. But the back of the book, so there's sections that will, like, prompts for you and your partner to ask each other questions, and for the partner to, because the thing that I was not ready for was that my husband was going to feel like he needed even more attention from me.
mm-hmm.
Right? I'm like, but wait, I'm the one that's messed up right now, not you.
Yeah.
But for them, they go through changes. They're affected by once you're, and I don't want to scare people because it ends up being a good thing, but once you are able to open up and say to your partner, hey, by the way, like, depending on what stage of your life the traumatic event happened, and saying, like, you know what, I'm changing, like, I'm realizing things, and I can't leave you out of this. You need to be part of this. They're going to go through changes themselves, and it's good to be open with one another about it. And so I just recommend that book. If you want to get the Kindle version, that's great, and just skip to the back if you want, because it really did. I mean, it made it a little bit easier in the beginning. It was still, I would say, a good 2 or 3 years before we kind of felt like we are where we are now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or and I can talk about that if you want. When it comes to one of the things that I said to Monica before, I want to talk about being sexual, because I feel like that's one thing that we don't
Mm-hmm.
hear about enough, candidly. And luckily my husband's like, whatever, you want to talk about our sex life?
Yeah.
Go on ahead.
Let's go there, right? Because I think it's really important for the listeners to hear that, because it is something that people don't really bring up, or they think it's, inappropriate, whatever. No, like, it's important. You want to develop healthy, connected relationships. You want to be able to feel safe with your partner in that physical, way. So
Mm-hmm.
feel free to share.
So I wanted to share a couple of tips. One is for me, I realized I was always more comfortable being the giver
Mm-hmm.
and not receiving. And then I would get annoyed sometimes when, why am I always like giving and not really? Well, because you created this pattern, right? And so once the memories were coming back, I realized I was pretty much like asexual. Like I didn't want to have intercourse. The thought of having intercourse made me think about rape, even though I knew my husband wasn't going to rape me. And actually, even before the memories came back, I would think about rape during sex, and not just with like, just in general. And I'd be like, that's weird. Is that normal? But I never ever talked about it with friends, and now it makes sense. But and it wasn't like I'm being raped. It was more like, oh my goodness, thank goodness I'm with someone who I trust, because if I weren't, this would be a terrible experience to be raped. So just like such a, now I understand why, but when you don't and those things pop up, you're just like, this is very odd to be thinking about when you're supposed to be in the moment. But I think also that's the thing, like I didn't want to be in the moment. I didn't want to be in my body. And so what I learned is that in addition to needing to feel comfortable receiving and talking about what I want, I had to reconnect with my body. I needed that downtime, especially as a parent and a mom. And I know you understand this, Monica. It's like to go from mom all day long, and then you're cooking, you're cleaning, to then just like flip a switch. I think men just maybe can do it more easily than we can, but I just can't easily just flip that switch and be like, ooh, now I feel sexy. I mean, I want to feel sexy, but I may not, like I need some quiet. I need to reconnect with myself first. And maybe receive from you first, to get us warmed up, so that I feel like you see me and I'm not just a vessel for you, but you see me, right? So that is something that I learned, and I had to talk to my husband about it, and I mean, it had been so long in our journey of figuring things out that it wasn't like an issue, because from his standpoint, he's like, I want to do whatever is going to make you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? Let's make this work for both of us. But one thing I will say, and I brought it here, was this book. So I love this book. And we got the book before, like when we first moved into our house, before the PTSD and everything started. And we took the test, and I think it was, during the quarantine last year, I said, you know what? I wonder if my love languages have changed. And they did. So like from 2012, 2011, to then 2020. Yeah. Look, I even wrote it down. It was 2012. My number one love language in 2012 was touch. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And at the bottom was like receiving gifts and acts of service. And then in 2020, acts of service and words of affirmation were my top two. And I'm like, yes, that makes sense. Yes, I do still appreciate touch, but it made sense. And it was just mind-boggling to see like it shifted, right? After remembering and coming to myself. Yeah. Have you ever taken the test?
Yes, I love the love languages. So for those of you who are listening, the love languages are the ways that you express and connect and love with your partner. And so I know for me, mine is quality time. My partner's is words of affirmation. So I make sure, knowing that I remind him, and if you're listening, I love you, baby, you're amazing. But, it's important. You want to build your partner up, right? You want to uplift your partner's spirit, right? And incomprehension dims the spirit. So when we can connect, when we can comprehend one another's love languages and really and use them, beautiful things happen in a relationship, right? So thank you so much for referencing that book. And what was the other book that you referenced too, just in case?
Oh yeah, Courage to Heal. If you look that up, it has like a longer subtitle title, but Courage to Heal. And it
Yeah.
has two different authors. And when we share this on social, we can mention the names again, you know, in our comments with the authors' names so that people can find it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, it is
So
awesome.
now, thank you again for sharing that and sharing the hope. Again, I think that that's really important for people to see. Like, if you are someone who has been in unhealthy relationships, if you've experienced trauma, abuse, whatever the case may be, and you've got this pattern in the story of like, toxic relationships and drama, and I just can't get it right. No, you absolutely can. You absolutely can heal. You can thrive and love again. You can have connected, beautiful, safe, intimate love with a partner, with friends, possibly even with family, depending on the dynamic there and the wounding. So, for me too, like I'm in a beautiful, beautiful relationship right now, and I could almost cry because, I remember praying for this, and I remember saying like, I deserve this, right? But it wasn't until I was like a full body yes of like, I deserve a good man, right? I deserve somebody kind and compassionate and all of these things, right? Like, and most of all, I just wanted peace.
Yes.
I just wanted to experience peace with someone who, valued it as much as me. And so it's been such an incredible journey with him. And it continues to deepen. And I think that, we need to hear more stories of hope like this from other people, other couples, because, we're in such a connected era right now with social media and the internet, but we're also so disconnected as humans. So to hear these stories of hope of like couples thriving in love after trauma is just so powerful. And maybe that's, our next topic for when we resume these talks in the fall. But so that being said, Nubia and I are going to take a little bit of a break with our discussions, but we'll resume. Summer 2021 is here. The pandemic is easing up, right? And there's a lot of good things coming. So
Yes, looking forward to resuming in the fall. This is great. And don't forget, everyone, you can reach out if you feel like something we said touched you today and you want to connect with Monika or myself, and you can DM us. Monika's website has contact information on it as well. And we'll put that in our comment section when we share this online, but we are not alone. And so I'm, as you can see, very much an open book, and I don't mind talking to strangers. So
ditto. You guys are not alone. And, we thank you for sharing this space with us. Thank you for listening. And we're here for you. So reach out if you need some support.